So at the beginning of my sketchbook, I started with the cut-up concept, which is the number of words that I researched. So I started with words such as high-tech, low-tech, pattern, deconstruct, botanist, flora, fauna, biophilia, birds, engrave, relief, subtract, etc. And I came up with a sentence: jumbled print, botanical clarity with artisan aesthetic, inspired country living collection. I then made mood boards from these words to gain ideas. So I looked at the word traditional and artisan. So I was looking at traditional block printing and lino printing relief methods and how they are used in modern spaces. I then looked at the word botanical and looked at different artists and designers' ways of using botanical imagery. So these are quite traditional, and then you've got Ellsworth Kelly and David Hockney who've worked in botanicals in different ways. Looking at the word jumble, again looked at Ellsworth Kelly, and I've mimicked some of his ideas and designs over here. So he cuts up his artwork and remixes them and juxtaposes them in order to create an image. Here I've looked at the word heritage. I found lots of nice checks and different things that relate to the word country living and heritage. I think checks are a really good example and they appear often in the home. At this side I've begun to play with A2 drawings and designs and cut them and collage them in different ways. I then screen printed some of these. I drew over the top in more detail to bring detail into this jumbled print. David Hockney really inspired me because he works quite monochromatically in this image and uses nice mark making technique in the background. Here again I've played with floral forms. I then transferred this onto screen and printed this. Here I've laser cut just a simple silhouette, almost like Ellsworth Kelly's black solid shapes. Some research. So the research started for me at the Glenvivian Art Gallery. I love the gold detail in some of the ceramic collection that I saw. I also love the botanical designs and the bird designs within these ceramics. I also visited the Christian Dior Designer of Dreams exhibition in 2019. And I really loved the black dress, which had this beautiful botanic illustration on it. Being on the dark ground made the botanics stand out much more. Some other research I undertook was looking at Mark Hurld's lino prints. I really like these because they remind me of traditional prints, such as William Morris's. You can see the weaving style in this, and it includes lots of mark making techniques. I've also included Edward Borden and Hannah Furnham. Hannah Furnham works with multiple layers of lino to create coloured prints. Here's some more of William Morris's collection. I often refer to William Morris's designs when creating digital artwork, as he repeats designs in different ways. They always have a rhythm to them. So you can see the weaving leaf that reappears in the design. I particularly like the designs that only use two colours. I think they're bold and they stand out well. Here's some more research on how designers and artists have used birds within their collection. So CFA Voisey created this beautiful bird illustration in a tree print. Recently, Cole & Son have recreated a design that's similar to this, but it's brought new life to it and put this design within a modern space, gives it a really fresh look. I particularly like the gouache birds over at this side too. Here is some research from the Whitworth Gallery. I went in January to see the Reformed Wallpaper exhibition. It was amazing to see all the different styles and colours and separations artists have produced to create wallpaper. The collection paid homage to traditional techniques and traditional methods of producing wallpaper. I also fell in love with some of the tapestries within the exhibition and within the Whitworth Gallery. They're very large and the size of the florals in life were almost the size of human heads. It was interesting to see the colours and the repeat layouts that the designers and artists had used. Here is a digital collage of all my gouache birds. I recently entered a fashion formula competition and this design placed within the 2020. Here on this side is an example of Joseph Frank's work. When creating gouache paintings, I looked at Joseph Frank because he uses very flat colour. He also adds mark-making techniques into his designs to give them more depth and flow. Here are a few more examples. I love the textures that are included within the prints and the details are amazing. Here I've looked at digital samples of wallpaper. They clearly have a very digital feel to them, but include lots of textures and tones and colour. It's interesting to see the scale of the designs. For example, this part of this flower head is just bigger than my hand. So when designing artwork digitally, it's important to consider the scale. Here I've explored laser cutting. I was trying to explore the differences in line techniques. So here it's quite thin and delicate, whereas here it's quite thick. Unfortunately, I wasn't as happy with this, as I think some of these lines need to be thicker, but I correct this later on. Here's some more examples of wallpaper. I particularly like these because they have more of a handmade and material feel. I really appreciate the materiality in these, as you can feel where the paste has been printed. Again, Farrow and Ball mainly work in 2 colours, and I think this is really effective. St Jude's is another one of my design loves. I really love all the artwork on their website. It's very traditional. I particularly like Mark Hurl's way of producing wallpaper. This is a lino print then transferred into a wallpaper design. You can see how he uses directional techniques in order to create his wallpaper and give it flow and rhythm. Again, here are some of his fabric samples, and it is important to take note of the scale. So when designing, I'm definitely considering scale within my designs. All the lovely marks and textures really appear nicely on the fabric, and the linen works really well. Here I've collaged some of my laser cut files together. With this poppy, I decided to do thicker lines, and I think it works better than the thinner ones you've seen previously. I also experimented with cutting just into parts of paper and then putting gold underneath, sort of to reinforce where my original inspiration came from, the gold little details on the ceramic plates in the Glenvivian. I've also placed a tracing of a rubbing from my laser engraved MDF board of my blackbirds and flora. Here is some examples of laser engraved velvets. I dyed up the velvet in uni and then laser engraved it. It is clear here to see where the engrave is filled. However, on this design, I only engraved the outline, so it is not as clear to see as it is with the fill. So it's important when laser engraving that I continue to fill the design. Here's some examples of relief printers. Eric Revilius makes highly detailed print with lots of marks within them, and I really like these. I laser cut one of my birds and included lots of marks, and I think it was very effective. I also laser engraved onto MDF in order to print. Because I've engraved directly onto the wood and not taken away the wood background, I will be left with a main print where all the wood appears and then white where the etching is, and I'm testing whether that works. Here I've played around with more laser engraved tests and dispersed dyes. I painted up some grounds and then printed with the birds onto fabric. It was really nice to explore this. Some laser cut artists I've been looking at. Klaus Appanini, he uses black paper and fabric to create his designs. There's a lot of flow and rhythm within the designs, and they remind me of repeat pattern wallpaper, however they are laser engraved. Here I tried to engrave into a different velvet, but because it had a cotton within it, it cut through rather than engraved, so that's a technical issue on the laser engraver that I'd need to fix to then produce an engraved sample. Here are some of the screen print tests that I was doing just on newsprint. Here I've got a bit more research into wallpaper and traditional designers. So Emma Bridgewater uses her prints on a variety of lifestyle products such as coasters, mugs, ceramic ware, and I really like the diversity of her designs. Xian Zheng is quite an inspirational designer as she uses wallpapers with magnets which match into the designs, so it's a great interactive way of working with wallpaper. Here's a colour palette, or the start of a colour palette I've developed. I've now worked with these colours digitally, so they have a slightly different feel. Again, some more wallpaper samples, just paying note to the scale really of these designs and the colours that the designers are using. Here is some nice illustrations of garden birds. On the back it explains a little bit about the bird and what its habitat is and what it likes to eat, which I found really useful for when designing and creating artwork to go within my collection. Here are some screen separations that I worked on for screen printing in uni. So the first layer the detail layer underneath, the first layer and the detail layer underneath. They were mainly using my previously cut laser files. Here are some seedlings that I've drawn in order to put into patterns and fill areas. This was my prints from the MDF board. You can see how I've been left with the white line in the areas that I've engraved, and I think this is quite successful. However, with the engraver upstairs being quite thick, some of the detail gets a little bit lost, so it's something to consider for the future. Again, some more screen printing tests and some disperse tests. So I laser cut some dispersed paper samples and then printed them onto synthetic fabrics. I was happy with the outcomes at the end, but I really liked the paper samples as they were left with lovely, rich, dark tones. I recorded some of the colours that I used up here. Just some drawing that I did in the Glenvivian Art Gallery, and I was looking at their recentest collection of local designers and artists working in Swansea who had exhibited their work. Here's some research and inspiration on what we typically see in British gardens. So I laser engraved a JPEG image to try that. I think that would look really effective engraved onto wood. It's a little caterpillar. Here are some of my screen printed samples. This one was quite dark and I used translucent inks which got lost in the dispersed background. So in future I would print opaque over the top of this. Here are some more just below. I was trying with a gold metallic here and then just translucent paste here. Here I tried illuminated discharge on wool. I tried to match the wool colours to my wallpaper colours which I aimed to print on. This is just clear discharge here, but I didn't pull it through the screen enough time, so it's quite vague. Here's some drawing and painting that I've been doing in the garden. I've been trying to draw florals on angles so they're easier to weave into designs when later designing in Photoshop. I really like the print forecast I came across in the Textile View magazine. It talks about being thoughtful and a slower way of life to make products that live longer and are more carefully sourced. This is the only way forward. It discusses sustainability and it revisits old techniques. Take inspiration from it, ancient cultures, look at art, use your brush skills, see the beauty in simple woodblock prints, tie-dye and batik, create new paisleys and ornamentals through carefully drawn flowers. I thought that was really nice because it talks about being slower and more thoughtful, and when I'm lino printing and block printing, those processes really engage with me and I really enjoy them. With the time and effort that goes into those sort of prints, I would agree that they are more expensive to buy, but they are meant to be something that you would keep for a long time, so there's almost mindfulness in how you purchase things like that. Here I've researched Mark Hurd and his lino cutting techniques. I love how he plans out his linos. It's clear to see where his inspiration designs come from when looking at his original first sketches. Here I lino printed at home a lily on a repeating lino block, but I will show you that later. Here is some laser cut research. I particularly like Rob Ryan. He uses high detail and delicacy within his designs. I think laser cutting is another great way to work with paper and create pattern and artwork. I really like Emma Van Hest's delicate flora. Even as single stems, they look beautiful and will translate perfectly into print design. Just some colour research. Some more painting of flora and fauna I found in the garden and on walks. Here is how I've planned my lino. So I planned my lily lino by creating a tile the same size as my lino block. I then split the tile into four and swapped each side out, which you can then see on my tracing paper. I then transferred that onto lino and begun cutting the background away to create the first print, and then added detail into the second print and printed over the top, which I will show you later. Here I've been trying to focus on painting on dark grounds and seeing what that looks like. Just some more gouache paintings of flora and fauna found in the garden. Here's some research. So this is more about my customer and target market. So these images came from Country Living and Best Home magazines. I particularly like the references to the botanicals and the checks and what you typically find in a country house. These are the people that I'd be aiming my work at. Below are a few more images of flora and fauna that have inspired my collection. From my gouache paintings, I developed some lino stamps, which are then stamped into patterns and created repeat patterns on Photoshop. I will show you them later. Here are some gouache paintings I did from flora found in the garden. These are my test prints when working with my original lino. So this is the first layer that I printed. I then printed detail on top, which I will show you. I also worked with stamps on different grounds from my gouache paintings. Here's a little bit more research. So I've looked at Angie Lewin and the way she cuts her lino into creating in two colourways. I've also looked at Milton and King because their designs have seamless flow and repeat structures. Martha Armitage and Rapture and Wright. Here is an example of my lino printed with the two colours. I then digitally created this in Photoshop and made a repeat design. Here is my plan for my diamond repeat. So I drew the diamonds out originally on graph paper. I then scanned it in to check that I was happy that everything was in the right place and I didn't want to add any further artwork. I then traced it onto tracing paper and transferred onto the lino, cutting the first section to give me a print, and then I added detail, which you can see here. Gathering textures, so exploring Photoshop to put into leaves and artwork. The wax worked particularly well. And again, just some more gouache paints. Paintings of bugs and caterpillars found in the garden. Here is some artist research I've undertaken. So here, these four are all Martha Armitage samples. The feel and quality to these samples is really great, and you can see the traditional techniques and methods used to create this print. I also really like Van Gogh's gouache paintings. The dark, moody tones within this print are beautiful, and the textures and marks he's left behind. Here is a 52 by 53 lino that I hand carved. I originally carved away just the background and didn't carve any of the detailing, so I will be left with this print here. I then further added detail to the print so that I will be left with just a detail layer. When combining the two layers together, the print looks like this. I then digitally edited this within Photoshop. To create my diamond repeated print, I started with a diamond lino tile. I originally just carved away all the background and didn't carve away any detail, so I was left with a repeating print that looked like this. Then, when adding the detail in over the top, I was left with a detail layer that looked like this. I then printed them both onto wallpaper so that I could make a lampshade. Here is my lily lino tile. Originally I carved away all the background and left the detail areas to be left with just a strong, solid colour of print. Then I carved in detail. I thought that it looked quite nice onto a dark ground. Here are the two layers together. I also had some fun playing around with stamps. So here are some of the stamps that I used. I made these stamps from my gouache paintings. I then doubled some of them up and printed them over the top, and I think they're really effective. I created digital designs with these in Photoshop.